Yo, what's going on, everybody? Here with the Brandon. If you guys today, welcome to my channel. Do all things algorithm likes, like the video, comment, and subscribe. And today we're doing another reaction video. I know reaction videos are piling on this channel. I always say it's not a reaction channel, but we're like just piling up a reaction channel. But I will say there's going to be reaction content. It is really good to just have like content on the channel while I'm doing these other things, like working on Midnight Suns review. I don't know when you guys see this. You might see the video after the Midnight Suns review. And I'm talking very fast, but there's a lot of things happening in the background, and these reaction videos are actually like at least allow me to have some form of content on the platform while I'm working on some other things behind the scenes. But today's video, we're gonna do a reaction video to Why Modern Gaming is Getting Worse by ENDYMION. So check him out. Link in the box below for the original video. Give him a like, give him a sub as well. Follow me on Twitch, links in the box below as well. So support me, support him. Let's watch this video and have some fun. ENDYMION.
It's ENDYMION, and lately I
know we're already pausing. Y'all know me. One of these guys, Yu-Gi-Oh fan. ENDYMION to a very good pendulum deck in Yu-Gi-Oh.
been playing the Dead Space remake, as I'm sure many other people are doing too, and man is it good. I know comparing Dead Space to open world games and other modern games may seem unfair, but playing it truly makes me think that the AAA industry desperately needs more quality over the same big empty open worlds and other nonsense that we've grown so accustomed to. So what can we learn from Dead Space and others like it, and why is it still refreshing and timeless so many years later? Dead Space originally released in 2008, which was a time where actual level design and quality mattered more over things like battle royales or how big your map is. It was originally conceived as a science fiction space horror version of Resident Evil 4, and the team at Visceral did an amazing job realizing that potential. This new Dead Space, which is a remake by Motive, just further solidifies why this game is a timeless classic. And hopefully it does well enough that EA also remakes Dead Space 2 and then completely forgets that Dead Space 3 even exists and just makes a new entry to replace it. Honestly, the one thing that's baffling me more than anything else while playing the remake is how refreshing and innovative it feels, especially in the gaming landscape of today. Most AAA games these days are just giant empty worlds full of the same repetitive activities strewn across maps so large you could probably fit thousands of entire dead spaces within them, yet never meet even an inch of the quality of that experience in today's games. Another thing I'm loving is how Dead Space is just a straight up action survival horror game. Too many games these days have shoehorned in RPG elements when they don't need it. It's why games like Gotham Knights are so disappointing. Because why is a random thug taking forever to
Say this right now, and I agree. I enjoy Gotham Knights, but I do agree with him on like it didn't need to be this, basically bullet sponge like Destiny style. They have light levels and things. They have levels and things like that. It's kind of like the issue I have with the Wolfenstein New Blood. Like, you can say what you want about that game when it comes to like the plot and things like that, but the reason why I myself can get into it is I don't want to play a Wolfenstein game where things are bullet sponge and they got numbers over their heads and things like that. That kind of like thing that's happening in gaming nowadays, where every game is now doing this, Division style, Destiny style. Enemies have levels, and so instead of one shot kills, is you gotta keep just infinitely like doing damage to them. It's tiring. It's like old. It's like it makes games that aren't meant for that less fun. Like, again, Wolfenstein's not a game that's supposed to be about that. So New Blood's less fun because you're spending too much time dealing with bullet sponge enemies. This game got the nice. You're having less fun because of bullet sponge enemies. Even the Division 2, there's some enemy types that are just like the level of bullet sponge to them. It just makes it unfun.
knocked out by a crime fighter who's dedicated their entire life to honing their body. But the level above their head is higher than mine, so it takes longer. It's stupid, but that's how many games are these days. But in Dead Space, while there are still parameters that dictate what does more damage when you upgrade, all of that modern nonsense we're used to is just thrown to the wayside. You see an enemy? Just shoot it, blast its limbs off, or use a telekinetic buzzsaw to make lasagna with its face. It's so refreshing to not have multiple currencies, constant damage numbers showing when I hit an enemy, or having a big world that feels lifeless and huge for no reason. It's become a trend in the past few years to take a franchise and then make it open world. Even Pokemon did it, which resulted in a technical mess of a game full of empty fields and canyons. While that freedom is nice, it came at the cost of true level design. That entire game just felt like a big field.
Like, it makes you wonder how good this game would have been in other games that went open world if they just made their world smaller. Like, open world has been a draw for a while, but we've gotten to a point with open world games where they're open and empty and open and broken. There's a lot of games that are broken where they might not be so broken. It might be more polished if they're just made smaller. Think about like Forspoken. Forspoken might be a better game overall, regardless of like individual things, if it was a smaller game and more contained and not this just empty world that it is when it comes to just the overall aspects of Forspoken.
You ran around aimlessly in until you did the story objectives. I get why games do open worlds, but there has to be a middle ground where games are open but still have actual game design to them. While big maps are good to an extent, Dead Space proves that size really isn't everything. Or at least that's what my wife tells me every time before her boyfriend picks her up. What's crazy about Dead Space is how ridiculously detailed and refined it all is. In most modern games, I couldn't even tell you a single side quest I've done, or the level layout, since today's games are so big yet offer little reason to remember their worlds. I think what Dead Space has proven to me is that it's kind of like Bloodborne in the sense that it's a game that I actually want to replay more than once. What I love about this era of gaming, and I'm talking like 2007 to 2015 specifically, is that there was actual effort being done to make games that were memorable and not just gloating about how many.
That is true. Like Horizon Zero Dawn, I played it because it's on PC. I haven't played the new one because it's not on PC yet, but I said it's a very good game. I don't remember a damn thing about that game other than the character's name. I'm not even like fucking with you. This isn't an exaggeration. I don't remember a single thing about Horizon Zero Dawn, and I enjoyed that game a lot. It was just an open world with a cookie cutter story, with cookie cutter acting. Nothing about it was memorable. And when it comes to like this Dying Light thing, the only reason why this even happened is because the Witcher developers are like, Witcher 3 has 300 hours of content, and they're like, the other studios are like, hey, people love Witcher 3, and CD Projekt Red gloated about 300 hours of content. Let's say we have 500 hours of content, and people would just assume that it's as much content and as much quality as Witcher 3, which is viewed as one of the greatest RPGs of all time, not knowing that, yes, it could take you 300 hours to do everything in Witcher, but there's a lot of content there that's actually good quality content. There's some side miscellaneous stuff that's, you know, just tedious tasks, but the majority of the Witcher content is actual good content.
Hours it will take you to beat it like Dying Light 2's promotions did. I'm absolutely sure too that many of you watching this could mentally map out the entire level layouts of games like Bloodborne or Dark Souls to an insane degree. It's not that those worlds are small, but that their Metroidvania level design and attention to detail force you to learn its layout in order to survive. Yet when
like, give you an example, Dark Souls 3 is basically a big circle. Like, literally, it's linear, but it's not open world. It's literally just a linear circle. Like, it's a circle. You can see everything that you can see in the entire map from one point of view. They're like, literally, I'm not even joking around. There's a point of view where you can see a good chunk of the entire map. It's just a big circle. In the middle of that circle, you got the freaking little swamp. You can see it all. And it's all about, you know, quality over quantity. Open world games are going with quantity, aka size, and not going with quality, aka performance, storytelling, voice acting, and the overall gameplay.
I play Forspoken, for example. I already couldn't tell you what that game's level layout is like, and that game just came out. Games these days are too big, and they lack any polish that is found in the smaller yet much more quality refined experiences like Dead Space. What I love about level design like Bloodborne or Dead Space is how they use their levels in more ways than one. For example, early on in Dead Space when you're entering the Ishimura, it's a simple straight corridor. But later on, once new gameplay mechanics are introduced, it becomes a contained playground that alters your perspective on what level design can really be. When I'm playing open world games these days, like...
Or pausing again, the example of that, Near Automata. Near Automata is a hidden gem. It's one of the best games I've played. That's like not your typical game, and that game changes up its level design so fucking much.
It's like for
Like you'll be doing like a regular RPG action game, out of nowhere you're like in a spaceship, you know, shooting things kind of in a way that you would like Galaga and things like that. It changes up like on the fly like that into different types of games, all while still being one like condensed game that's kind of open world, but again it's kind of like that small open world, not like just massive like games are nowadays.
Spoken, or even Horizon Forbidden West, while they may look pretty, their worlds are just big for bigness sake. This is why I've replayed games like Bloodborne or Dark Souls to an unhealthy degree, because not only are they fun, they're designed so that it rewards and promotes repeated playthroughs. Things like New Game Plus are nothing new, and it's thanks to its implementation into gaming by the legendary Chrono Trigger, which created New Game Plus as a concept. It's been largely adapted into many of today's games, and for good reason. However, even when games like Horizon or God of War have New Game Plus, they don't make me want to replay them. In Horizon, Forspoken, or really most open world games, New Game Plus sounds like a nightmare because the worlds are too big and I know it'll take forever to get to the good stuff. In God of War's case, its level design is more contained, which is great, but it also ruins New Game Plus as a concept because all the cutscenes are unskippable. And especially in Ragnarok's case, that game pulls control from you so often to force you into story time mode that you'd have to pay me to play that game again. Dead Space, of course, has some forced cutscenes too, but they're not nearly as frequent, and I was astounded by how much game there was to be had in it. I did beat Dead Space when it originally launched too, but it's been well over like 50 years since it released, so I've forgotten stuff thanks to the brain rot of today's modern world. So coming back to it was like eating a meal in a restaurant that reminded me of happier times, if those happier times involved infected crew members and flesh walls. It's as if I almost forgot what it was like to enjoy a game that wasn't the size of an entire country, but with the depth of a puddle. Of course, this doesn't mean there aren't modern games that are also huge that don't offer great depth as well as length. The obvious pick is Elden Ring, which is absolutely massive, but does something that most other open world games don't do, which is still have actual level design dungeons.
Yeah, you don't feel like Elden Ring is a massive open world game, but you don't feel it being empty. Elden Ring doesn't feel like an empty game. It feels like everywhere you go, it seems like a contained area. Like it's open world, but it also seems contained at the exact same time. Like, look at Limgrave. Limgrave is a big empty place with a lot of like structures, but there's a lot of stuff around those structures, and the amount of trees that the game has kind of like makes it more cluttered. And then you have all these like different enemies that also adds to the clutter. Then you have the castle up there. That castle's not open world. That's a linear experience. Like there's, other than like going into Limgrave, most of the other areas of Elden Ring are actually a little more closed off. The other zones are just that, they're zones. Limgrave is the big open world of Elden Ring, but going to certain places like Godra's Castle, going to the city at the end, that was called things like Lindale. Those are all like smaller contained environments, where Limgrave is just big open world things. Even though the game itself is considered massive, the real content is kind of like just controlled
amidst the open world. It's the complete opposite of Forspoken, because as I was reaching the first major boss in that game, you have to enter her realm through this gateway. And I was hoping that once you go through it, it would be a more concise level layout with, you know, actual level design. But unfortunately, once you dive in, it's just the same as what's come before, just now it's more red and spiky. But eventually you do reach the boss's
in light of your unique situation,
his castle, and yet again I had that feeling, hoping that finally I'd have a real level to explore. You then enter the castle, go through a small foyer, up some stairs, through a hallway, into the boss's room, and that's it. Then you're thrown back into the massive open world, and it's disappointing. Elden Ring, on the other hand, is like the most near perfect fusion of games like Horizon or Forspoken, but with the level design of Dark Souls or Dead Space. Mind you, I still think Elden Ring is a little too big for my tastes, and I still much prefer games like Bloodborne or Dark Souls over it, But regardless, what is here is still miles and leagues ahead of anything in its genre today. Elden Ring is great because it has those classic legacy dungeons like Stormvale, Raya Lucaria, and open world zones like the entirety of Florida. But without those massive legacy dungeons, the game is still compelling
Florida,
because it's littered in smaller dungeons, surprise boss fights, and general terror in any direction. But when you look at Elden Ring's world, it too is kind of like Forspoken in the sense that there really is only one safe town, and the rest is just a big hostile environment full of enemies and not much else. But the difference between Elden Ring's world and Forspoken's is that at least in Elden Ring's case, I can actually stumble across dungeons with actual level layouts that feel as if a real human hand created them instead of what feels like AI generated landscapes in Forspoken's case. Really, when it comes to open world games, there's probably three in particular that I think do it right for me. First is Elden Ring, of course, then there's Skyrim, which again has actual dungeons, cities, and so on, which is amazing. And then there's, of course, The Witcher 3. To be honest, even Witcher suffers from the open world syndrome because it has repetitive tasks like monster nests or bandit camps all over its map. But at least the devs support those activities with amazing attention to detail and a major emphasis on story and character. Not to mention that Witcher 3's world feels alive and real with places like Novigrad, which you could spend hours in just combing that city for quests, items, and playing.
Yeah, that's something that you don't really see a lot in modern video games, and Witcher is an old game now, which is funny. Like, The Witcher is almost a 10-year-old game. But something about The Witcher is, when he says it feels alive, and a lot of games, you are a character in a world, and that's pretty much it. And, you know, everything kind of like revolves around you, but The Witcher seems like you're just another person. Like, you don't seem important at all. Like, you're in a world, but that world's cluttered with other people, and they all have their life. There's people who are singing, there's prostitutes on the corner, there's kids playing in the streets and playing in water, there's people farming on their land, there's people who are getting drunk at a tavern. Like, it's an actual world, it's alive, where it's, instead of like you're here and everything kind of revolves around you, you're just a dude within the city. You're no one important. That's a rare thing in modern world games, where you don't get that sense that the atmosphere is revolving, or like it's existing and you're a part of the atmosphere, versus like it's revolving around you. Like, the game's based on you, but Witcher game is like, no, there's a world here. There's all these other things going on, and you just don't happen to be in that town at that time. If that makes sense.
Hours of Gwent. God, I love Gwent. I guess what I'm getting at is that the reason why Dead Space has resonated with me so much is because it embraces things that feel lost in the modern AAA world these days. Everything is so concerned with being massive, and let's be real, what's usually the first thing players ask these days when a new game is coming out? It's not just the quality, they also want to know how long the game is too. Because there's this bizarre fascination with quantifying how many hours a game is to whether a game is worth full price or not. Dead Space is not a long game. You could easily beat the whole thing in 10 hours or less, yet it's absolutely worth full price over any of these modern open world games.
Quality.
Even if they are 6 or 8 times its length. Yet players have this brain rot festering in their heads, telling them that every dollar spent on a game should equate to at least 1 hour of enjoyment, which is insane to me. I'd much rather play something that's replayable and offers unique gameplay like Dead Space over Forspoken,
make a good game, people play it.
Really any of these modern games. I know the one argument is that not everyone can afford every game, but ask yourself, are you really having more fun with a game that makes you do the same thing over and over again ad nauseum, over a game that will truly stick with you? Is that really the direction we want gaming to go in? Like I said before,
not only is it a game that sticks with you, but it's a game that you'll replay. A good game will get replayed over and over again. I've replayed through every Halo game every single year since they came out. I replayed through every Mass Effect game every single year. I replayed every Dragon game every single year. A good game you'll keep playing because you love that game, because it's a good game. You won't replay a lot of the modern games because they're not, even if there are, because you will consider them good, there's too much boredom, there's so much time, it's going to take you too long to just play through the game. Look at like Halo Infinite. As I've been playing through Halo games, Halo Infinite is being an open world game, kind of takes a little longer than the normal Halo games because you got to do all this other extra stuff instead of just playing through the game. So when it comes to like replaying through the Halo franchise every single year, when I replayed through Halo Infinite this year, was kind of a drag. 'Cause it's like I just want to play through the main quest, so I don't really care about this other stuff because I just want to play through the game. So you want these developers, I keep saying this in my Ubisoft videos, just make good games. You don't have to have all this tedious, repetitive, boring drag kind of quest lines and things like that shit. Like, you don't have to have a bloated game like Valhalla to have a good game. Just make a good game and I'll play it. I'll play the shit out of a game that's good, that's only lasts 10 hours long. I'll play it 60 hours because I'll just replay it freaking 5 more times versus a game that's 180 hours and it's like I force myself to get to the end of this game.
Many people can perfectly map out the entire level layout of Dark Souls in their head. Like, I could confidently map out Bloodborne's levels pretty well because of how good that game's design is. But if you put a gun to my head and told me to map out Assassin's Creed Valhalla's map, just tell my mom I love her and pull the trigger, cause there's no way I'll remember any of that. Look, I'm not saying that games like Valhalla or Forspoken can't exist. I know there's plenty of people out there who enjoy those kinds of games, and I do too to some extent as well. There's nothing wrong with enjoying things that others find terrible, like sometimes you can watch a really bad movie but find enjoyment in how awful it is. But Dead Space has really opened my eyes to the realization that the games of today are not offering truly meaningful or memorable experiences. Well, in the AAA landscape anyway. Thankfully, at least, it seems that modern gaming to some extent is going to stray away from the open world syndrome and go back to making actual games with real level design again. It was reported that Final Fantasy XVI as well as Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will have open world-like levels, but they won't be like Forspoken. Instead,
wow.
Hey!
Instead, the game's world will be segmented into smaller regions that are still open while still having the quality of actual human hands making compelling levels. We also have the imminently releasing Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which is inspired heavily by games like Dark Souls. And it's looking like it too will have intricately designed levels, and I can't wait to play that game. Open world games are of course going to stay a norm in the world of gaming, I accept that. And it didn't really take off in an explosive way until The Witcher 3 came out and dragged its nuts across the industry, and it looks like we're having that second explosion with Elden Ring. Even the creator of The Last of Us, Neil Druckmann, said he sees Elden Ring inspiring the industry in the future. Neil said, quote, "I'm more recently intrigued by stuff like Elden Ring and Inside that doesn't rely as much on traditional narrative to tell its story. I think some of the best storytelling in The Last of Us, a lot of it is in the cinematics, but a lot of it is in gameplay and moving around a space and understanding a history of a space by just looking at it and examining it. And to me right now is some of the best joy I get out of games that trust their audience to figure things out, that don't hold their hand. That's the stuff I'm really intrigued by going forward." End quote. So even the Druckmaster believes that Elden Ring will become the new industry standard for game design, and honestly that makes me happy. I think games like Dead Space, Bloodborne, or Elden Ring really do show that the best kind of game design is when the experience is crafted in such a way to promote memorization. It's why I love Dead Space so much. I love how the game starts off very linear, but eventually you'll gain access to fast travel. And this transit system allows you to then reach previous levels, and once you've gained new security passes, you can then start opening up the entirety of the Ishimura and really start to appreciate how much love and care went into every part of that game. I really do hope that the path the game industry goes down is less relying on massive open spaces and more on actually making games that feel fun to explore and dissect. This is why I can't wait for the remake of Resident Evil 4, because that game's level design and structure is amazing and it's full of crazy stuff. It's also why games like Dark Souls took the entire world by storm. Some may argue that Dark Souls is sort of open world, but it isn't. It has more in common with Dead Space than it does any open world game. It's the same with Bloodborne. The reason why those games are so compelling to explore is because every level was designed for specific moments or encounters. It's why it leads to surprise moments like getting pulled by a tentacle in Dead Space and having to blast it away before you're turned into human sushi. Or returning to areas in Bloodborne and finding out there's giant cosmic alien spider things who have been there the entire time but you lack the insight. I just hope that the direction gaming goes in is less about offering big empty worlds full of bandit camps, and more about making games that I genuinely want to play through more than once that actually give reason to engage besides cleaning up a map from icons. This is why Dead Space releasing when it did is so important. It shows not only that the game is timeless, but that the AAA industry is lacking when it comes to making truly unique games that players actually want to engage with. I think my taste in gaming is somewhat returning to its roots, where I'm becoming less interested in big games and finding far more enjoyment in smaller ones that have more meat than fat on the bone. Evil West is a good example of this. It's a linear,
Like that's a big reason why everyone has massive backlogs, because all these games are so long and big, and you want to do as much as you possibly can in those games. So just via that, there's a shit ton. There's just a big backlog of games for you to play, because you can't complete them all. And it's like, but there's a new game out, so I want to play that. It's like your backlog just get bigger and bigger and bigger because these games are just so big. I think overall what we're noticing right now is that remakes are better than a lot of the modern games that's coming out, and the reason why is because they're more focused on giving you a good story experience in a condensed fashion without it needing to be 100 hours long. Like when people said I had 100 hours in Skyrim, it was like, man, you put some good time into Skyrim. If you say you put 100 hours into Valhalla, it's like you're like still in Act 2. Like the vibe there is different. Like 100 hours used to feel like, when it comes to like an RPG, if you're MMOs, that's 100 hours is nothing. But you play like RPGs and action games, 100 hours means that you're combing that game for all this content and you're doing a lot of work. Whereas like now it's like that's basic for any low budget freaking RPG game now.
action adventure game, but I love it. Games like Mass Effect or Bioshock by today's standards would be considered small, yet I would argue they're infinitely better than 99% of the games that come out today anyway. Dead Space has proven to me that the quality of what many AAA modern games reach for today are just not what excite me about games anymore. The fact Dead Space has returned where everything is so heavily monetized with live service models, massive maps, and daily quests is important. It's just oozing with quality, detail, and offers something that is completely unique and far more relevant and interesting than what's trendy today. Like I said, open world games are not awful. Well, not all of them. But I guess in the end, Dead Space really did prove to me anyway that what really matters isn't the size of your world or the girth of your content, but how you use it. Sometimes bigger isn't always better, and maybe when it comes to gaming, that's what I'm looking for these days. I'm tired of cleaning up massive open worlds of live services and of games wasting my time with the same crap over and over again. Games like Dead Space remind me that gaming used to be simple yet effective. And like Bloodborne and Dark Souls, Dead Space truly does.
This is a really good video. Like seriously, like go watch the original video, give him a view, and like that video, because this is a really good video. And I understand fully what he's trying to say about, like, basically games nowadays have surrendered telling a good story and are now just about how long they take to beat. Like one of my favorite franchises of all time, Assassin's Creed. I hate Valhalla. I think Valhalla is the worst Assassin's Creed. I think it's utter garbage. Why? It's not an Assassin's Creed game. You're not an assassin. The story is whack. It's not memorable. Nothing about the game is really has any redeeming quality. It's just a very, very big Viking game. That's pretty much all it is. It's a very, very big Viking game, and that's it. Like it doesn't. I won't remember it the way I remember Assassin's Creed 1, 2, and 3. I won't remember the way I remember 4. It's not a memorable game, and that's kind of the issue with a lot of the Assassin's Creed games. Like I remember Origins, because Origins has a really good story. Odyssey has a very good story and a good location, but Valhalla, much like Syndicate, it's just uninteresting. So we want to see developers make more interesting games that we remember and that we can enjoy playing, and not just, hey, this game is it's pretty big, go do stuff. Like, there's nothing to do. Like I love the Division, but that's what Division is. Division is just go do stuff. The story here is lackluster and sucks. I like story. Give me a good story. I will take a 10-hour story over 100 hours of nothing. With all that said, if the video, thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Follow me on Twitch. Links in my box below. Me and boy Noob is out of here. Y'all stay safe. Deuces.